The sun is an energy planet. It gives and takes energy. A solar cycle is 365 days. It affects the stock market every 30 days as the sun transits through the 12 signs of the zodiac. The sun also has an 11-year solar cycle in which sunspot activity peaks, followed by 5.5 years solar flares, a period of more or less calm with respect to the sun's surface. And during this period, the sunspot areas emit a wide range of intense radio and electromagnetic radiation of various types, affecting people and conditions of the planet Earth. This has been researched not only by astrologers but by astronomers. It has a definite effect on the stock market, commodities, and other areas related to the stock market. As in all living matters, it seems to affect mundane things like corporations and the stock market in the same way. This is to say that with regard to the birth month and the birth date, 6 months prior to the birth date, the solar cycle is high, giving energy and pushing the related company forward. The sun also is a planet associated with the ego, appearance, personality. 6 months prior to the birth date, the company is brought out before the public. The birth date to 6 months after, the energy flow is low, it becomes weaker, and this affects the stock market in the same way. As an example, the stock market was born on May 17, 1792. So the months of May through November would relate to low activity. They would affect the market as far as its price and structure. As we go from December through May, we go through the high cycle, the up period of the sun. But there are many cycles of the sun that affect different areas of the stock market, as the sun affects each house with relation to the buying public. In each 6-month period of the year, we will also find a close relationship between price, movement, and volume movement from Aquarius to Leo. This would be from February to the last 2 weeks of July. As we look at example 1, we find that the birth month and the sun cycle 6 months prior to the birth month is at a high level. 6 months after the birth date, it is at a low level. In example 2, we take the midheaven aspect to the ascendant. We can see in example 2 that the chart of the stock exchange starts its up level in the sign of Aquarius, and its down level begins in the sign of Leo. So these are the 2 breaking points within a year, under Aquarius and under the sign of Leo as the sun transits these signs. The low part of the chart, which is the nadir, would be in the sign of Libra. This will generally be the low point of the year, as October would always represent low price, low volume, in which the opposite point to the midheaven is Aries. This would be affected by the planet represented at the midheaven. However, in April, under no afflictions, this would be a great month where records would be set in the areas of volume and prices. As we start with Aquarius, this would run from the last 2 weeks of January through the first 2 weeks of July. This would be a high volume month. However, as the cycle proceeds through Pisces, which is a weak sign, it would represent a weak month or volume. From the latter part of March through April and May, and even into June, these could be above average months for prices and volume. Now, as the Leo portion is activated from July through October, these are very weak months. You cannot expect too much in the way of prices or volume. If there is any weakness in the market, it will more or less have a breakdown during these months. Not only are we in the 6-month period after the birth date, but we also have the effect in the Leo portion of the house when the sun is moving downward towards the nadir, which is the cusp of the 4th house. The midheaven is always the cusp of the 10th house. So the low points in this pattern would mainly be in February through Aquarius and in August when it drops down, with a peak at the midheaven, which would be in April under the sign of Aries. Now the 6-month cycle tends to extend from the Aquarius portion to the Leo portion, and again from the Leo point to the February point. Prices tend to follow the volume curves from these aspects, with the weaknesses in the February-March, July, August, and October-November periods. Therefore, in judging the stock market as to whether it will turn up or down, it is best to look at the sun. The aspects pertaining to the sun. If the sun is under heavy affliction, then these periods represent a bearish market. In the good aspect, it will be bullish. In the good periods moving upward toward the midheaven, it will be higher than normal. Moving toward the lower section, it will be lower than normal. This is why you will have so many depressions, recessions, panic, and fear into the stock exchange in the latter part of the year as it approaches the month of October. With this relation of the sun's aspect and the influence of the market, this will also affect a lot of stocks. Individual stocks are affected by the movement of the Dow-Jones Industrial. You have to relate a 50% markup on a bullish market and take away 50% of an individual stock if the market is bearish. You can only give a stock 25% on its own merit. That means if the market is bad and the stock shows indication of moving up, then your price ratio as far as what price to sell should be at a 25% profit. There are other indications, though, at which you could go for a 50% profit if the earnings are extremely high. A lot of your gold mine stocks and silver stocks will generally do the opposite in a bad market and go all the way up. But if the market is bad and the sun cycle is moving into that low period, then you want to go short or short at 50% from its point at that degree at that time, when the market shows indications of falling backwards. But the sun is a minor aspect in relation to the overall picture of the market. However, it affects the market every year, and there will be a pattern to each period of the year as far as the sun's transit through that sign. This will also relate to individual stocks. Individual stocks will show the same pattern. So do your homework. Any time that you select a stock, find the month in which to buy it and the month in which to sell. The month in which it is usually at its highest point. You can relate this to the moon for its exact day for buying or selling. The market will always be influenced by the sun pattern, and it will happen year after year. You will find from January to the last 2 weeks in July the market prices will be upwards, and in the latter part of the year, after the influence of Leo, the market will be down in price. This is the average trend that will occur always. This affects volume as well as prices themselves. However, it is important that you realize the influence of the sun in the chart of the New York Stock Exchange and the sun's complete cycle. Also, any corporation will be affected by certain cycles of the sun through these signs. It would be important to backtrack about 12 years during the pattern of the sun cycle in order to see the pattern on which the company is being activated as far as the solar cycle. The period of the sun in Aries is usually from March 20 through April 19, about the sun in the sign of Taurus is usually from April 20 through May 20. The sun's transit in the sign of Gemini is generally from May 21 through June 20. The sun's transit through the sign of Cancer is from June 21 through July 22. The sun's transit in the sign of Leo is usually from July 23 through August 22. The sun's transit in the sign of Virgo is generally from August 23 through September 22. The sun's transit in the sign of Libra is from September 23 through October 22, through the sign of Scorpio, from October 23 through November 21, through the sign of Sagittarius is from November 22 through December 21, through the sign of Capricorn is from December 22 through January 19, through the sign of Aquarius from January 20 through February 15, through the sign of Pisces from February 19 through March 20. These are the 12 signs with the transit of the sun. Again, let me stress the importance of the aspect of the sun during these periods. If it involves a combination that relates to panic, crashes, recession, depression, then these months will be more intensified as far as the effect. If the transit is in a trine or a good aspect, then the movement will be less severe than under normal conditions. There is one more important point to the solar cycle, which is really the result of another cycle. This is the 19-year cycle of the motion of the plane of the moon's orbit. It is the solar eclipse cycle. Although there is partial or total eclipse, each year usually there will be an eclipse near the same degree of the zodiac once every 19 years. This is a major eclipse. This major eclipse does have an effect on changes within the stock market, and these changes have been reflected year after year during these cycles. Since this eclipse involves the moon, it represents changes in relation from a moon-sun characteristic. In this cycle, the sun makes a complete circuit of the sky and reaches the same node at the same place on the ecliptic as shown in diagram 3. This length of time is 6,585.321 solar days, which is 18 years, 11 and 1/3 days. The shortest time required for the sun to travel from and return to the same node is 346.6 solar days. This interval is known as an eclipse year. It is listed on the calendar year because of the effect of the session, which is known as a slow regression of the nodes around the ecliptic. 19 of the eclipse years contain 6,585.4 days, which is precisely 223 synodic months. This is when the nodes themselves become important in the predictions on the stock market. The moon affects changes in emotions. The daily influence on the stock market is related to changes of the moon as it transits through each sign. Its effect on individual corporations would be the same. The moon works in association with the planet Saturn. The moon's phase cycle is from 28 to 29.5 days. Saturn's cycle is from 28 to 29.5 years. So, where it takes Saturn 2.5 years to transit one sign, it takes the moon 2.5 days. If the moon shows weakness in one sign as to where a stock would drop rapidly during that time, for example, if the moon goes into the sign of Taurus, the stock will go up or down. However, if it has a trend of going down, then when Saturn is also in the sign, this would cause a 2.5-year downtrend for the stock. So even though a lot of aspects related to the moon are minor, such as a stock might drop 1/8 to 1/2 during its transit through any one sign, it does relate to a longer trend with the effects of Saturn. In judging the daily influence of the moon's dominance over a certain stock, bear in mind the influence of a transit of the sun. If the sun's movement shows a high point for the Dow-Jones averages, then the moon as a negative factor on the Dow-Jones will not have that much influence. If they are both at a high point, then the stock would rise extremely high on that day. So use the moon as a daily indicator together with the 30-day movement of the sun in each sign. There are 3 cycles related to the moon. One is called a moon return. This cycle occurs every 4 years. Check the 4-year cycles day by day of a stock. The moon returns below the same position. Another cycle is at 27-12 days by the sign itself and in the 28 or 29-12 days by phase. These are the cycles represented by the moon. The pattern of the 4-year cycle is more dominant in a long-term trend relating to the stock market. The moon also has a period which is stagnant. This is called the moon void, of course. It is a period when the moon is changing from one sign to another without being aspected. For research, this is not a period to purchase stock, as it represents changes that could go completely reverse. It is an unstable period of the moon itself. You can also determine monthly trends by watching the moon under each cycle. In a period of 28-29% days, if the moon falls square, conjunction, or opposite to passing planets over the midheaven, this will give you an indication of good or bad returns following the week in relation to the stock market itself. It generally relates to people's emotions. The moon's nodes are also prominent indicators as far as the movement around the zodiac. If an individual stock has the moon's north node going toward the midheaven, this indicates it will have movement. If it falls below the ascendant, this generally causes it to move downwards. However, again, you have to use the other planetary movements to make a complete judgment. You cannot do it by the nodes themselves, but the nodes would reinforce any conditions shown as a downtrend in a certain stock. The moon and sun in relation to each other show a type of speed that a certain cycle is indicated to move under as the effects of the sun. The moon and the earth are your prominent factors relating to the movement during the year. The other planets more or less determine your long-term trends. The speed of the moon is affected by the tidal deformation of the earth, which produces a gradual increase on the moon's orbital speed, which in turn makes the moon slowly recede, causing a fast or a slow moon, which does reflect the aspects as far as movement of a cycle. If it's fast, there's a lot of action in the market, or if it's slow, then a change is predicted. In diagram 4, we have a plain view of the moon's orbit. We show that the Earth-Moon gravitational interaction generates 2 bulges, more or less like a plastic bubble. The Earth has an axial rotation, which is faster than the orbital rotation of the moon, and the effects of this frictional drag is that the bulges are carried around the Earth's rotation until a balance is established between the drag and the tide generating force. In diagram 4, we have equilibrium point #L. This is nearer to the moon than point 2. It is therefore experiencing a stronger gravitational attraction than 2. Both 1 and 2 are displaced from the central line, so that the forces along with 1 and 3 and 2 and 3 coverage toward the center of the moon. These 2 forces may be resolved at the moon into components that act, in one case, along the central line toward the Earth, and in the other case at right angle into the direction of the moon's orbit. The components acting toward the center add together, whereas the components in direction of the orbit are in opposition. Because the force along with 1 and 3 is larger than along 2 and 3, this means a net unbalanced force acting on the moon in the orbital direction, which has the effect of accelerating its motion, moving it into an orbit of a larger radius, and modern estimates indicate a recessional speed of about 3.2 cm per year. For accurate calculation, there are many moon signbooks or moon calendars that will give you the transit of the moon each day, which you can relate to stock predictions. In the speed of a stock, we have the 1/2 cycle, the 1/4, 3/4, and these speeds indicate the changes, as in relation to the up and down cycle price of each stock.